Um, so for those of you just joining, please go ahead and share your name, your pronouns, and your organization in the chat. Got a few more folks coming in. Okay. Well, I am Sarah Kielholtz. I am the Director of Data and Strategic Insights here at WFN. I know many of you from the data and research peer community, but I also haven't had a chance to work closely with some of you. So I am very happy to meet you today. We are joined by my wonderful Women's Funding Network colleagues, Miranda Magelli, Director of Programs and Policy, Sam Hopper, Manager of Learning and Engagement, and Kukwa Ose Giemfi, the Technical Project Manager for the Data and Insights team. Many of you probably know Miranda and Sam pretty well at this point from their wonderful work with UN membership, but I would love for you to get to know Kukwa a bit better. So Kukwa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kukwa Giemfi. As Sarah said, I am the Data and Insights Technical Project Manager here at WFN. It's so exciting to meet all of you all. I've seen some of your names in our database, so it's great to put a name to the face. So a little bit about myself. I've worked in philanthropy since 2016. I've done a mix of things between admin assistant, grants management, grant specialist, a lot of things having to do with tracking data, following, I don't know why I'm nervous today. Following the grant life cycle. Prior to me coming to WFN, I worked for a grants management system software company called Smart Simple, where I was the implementation consultant building out systems for different nonprofits, different research organizations, and different foundations. So that job was all about building systems, streamlining workflows, keeping data intact and clean, moving it from one system to another. So that's why I'm here at WFN. I enjoy my job here, and I am excited to speak with you all today.
Thank you so much, Kukwa. We are also joined by Cesar Del Valle, Director of Partnerships at Candid, and Dr. Kathleen Clerkin from Vice President of Research at Candid. So Cesar has been working with us for more than a year in dreaming up this project. And many of you may remember Kat from our conference, who shared a panel with Viviana on intersectional data and the power of visibility. And I'm going to turn it over to both of them to say hello.
All right, I'll go first. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here. Good to see you all. Excited for this conversation. Yes, I'm the Associate VP of Research at Candid. I've been here for about 3 years now. And my team's job is to, play with the data that Candid has and try to unpack what stories it has to tell us and share those insights with the sector. So this space is exactly the space that I like to be in. So thanks for letting me join you all.
Good afternoon. Good morning. I think I saw an aloha out there, so early morning for some of us. Pleasure to see and meet everyone. My name is Cesar Del Valle, or Cesar Del Valle. I use he, him pronouns. I'm Director of Partnerships here at Candid. Not too dissimilar from Kat. I've been here for just under 3 years. A lot of our work is really on trying to build some visibility as to the importance of standardized and centralized demographic data. So looking forward to sharing more of that and looking forward to the response and the questions that you all may have as we see how this initiative can evolve and bring value to your community.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen to share the agenda and overview for our meeting today. So without further ado, let's try and do that. I'm not very good at sharing and looking at notes, so we'll see how this goes. Okay, we may have to leave it in this mode. Okay, so our agenda for today is welcome and introductions. We're going to talk about the origin story of the Demographics via Candid initiative. We're going to share out some intersectional research and insights that Candid has been doing with the data they've collected so far. We're going to be talking about also the origin story of WFN and Candid's partnership, how it came to come about. We'll provide you with 3 ways to get involved depending on your organizational capacity at this time, with some tangible benefits to each one, and then go over questions and next steps. We try to leave ample time at the end of the session for you to ask questions, provide feedback. Again, we really want this to be a dynamic relationship between us, Candid, and you. So before we get on to the origin story, I would like to do some grounding in kind of why this session or why this project and partnership is important to us. And I'm sharing the work of Mimi Onuoha, who identifies as a Nigerian American artist and data activist. And she has an incredible installation called The Library of Missing Data Sets. And if you're in New York, I highly recommend that you try to see it. She often will have installations around the city. But she talks about how that which we ignore reveals more than what we give our attention to. And it's in these things that we find cultural and colloquial hints of what is deemed important. Spots that we leave blank reveal our hidden social biases and indifferences. And the reason why I bring this forward is because we know that the organizations in our network have been working so hard to address societal indifferences, especially at the intersection of race and gender through your data and research. So I want to give a shout out, if you're here today, to Ms. Foundation's Living with Pocket Change report, Women's Fund of Miami-Dade's Gender Equity Index, Washington Area Women's Fund's Rise as They Lead report on Black women leaders in the DC area, Women's Fund of Rhode Island's Census of Nonprofits, Grantmakers for Girls of Color's Comprehensive Intersectional Survey. And if I've missed you, which I probably have, please feel free to share your work in the chat. This project is really emerging out of the expertise and knowledge that all of you bring to this work, and we want to uplift and acknowledge that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Cesar for the origin story of the project. And now I can go into presentation mode.
Thanks, Sarah. I was going to say, I love this view because I can see exactly the slides that are coming, so it works, but whatever works for you. I love that last quote also. I mean, I think oftentimes at Candid, we speak about the fact that which you do not track, you just simply can't measure, and that which you can't measure, you can't actually progress upon. So I think it's very aligned with what we're trying to build as far as the Demographics via Candid initiative, and most definitely with regards to the intersectional resources that we're looking to co-create. You can go to the next slide, please, Sarah. So again, for anyone that's not familiar, Candid in essence recognizes that there's just frankly billions of transactions happening on an annual basis, with capital flows flowing from philanthropic organizations to entities doing incredible work on the ground. Our mission and our goal is really to find out where that money is coming from, where it goes, why it matters, and ultimately to be a service provider to you all and to the sector to ensure that everyone has the information they need to do good. You can go to the next slide, please, Sarah. If you haven't heard of Candid before, I would hope or venture to even guess that you probably are familiar with us. So Candid is the offspring of the merger between Foundation Center and GuideStar, which happened just about over 5 years ago. Foundation Center was mapping comprehensively the most amount of grants transactions. And then GuideStar had data on about 2 million organizations. And so as we came together, we had a more robust view of the sector, and we're looking to see how we can continue to leverage that perspective and better support your work and that of the rest of the organizations doing incredible work day in and day out. You can go to the next slide, please. So again, just really speaking a little bit quickly around what the origin has been of the initiative and what is Demographics via Candid. And the next slide, please, Sarah. So I think not to insensitively gloss over the importance of the racial reckoning that was happening in the 2020 year and the manner in which philanthropy showed up. Some foundations, perhaps many of you, made explicit racial equity pledges. But many foundations came to Candid because we are their data partner, where we're saying we would like to have more visibility into the demographic makeup of our grantee portfolio or community. Either to inform racial equity pledges, to inform internal conversations about the potentiality of racial equity pledges, or at minimum, just back to those quotes, to have visibility over what is the diversity makeup of our grantee community, perhaps to ensure that it's representative of the communities we aim to serve, and a host of different analyses around uncovering unconscious bias and the sort. As more and more funders came to us, we saw that manifesting in a growing desire of more and more demographic surveys. So just to give you a data point, in 2021 alone, we were asked to fill out as an organization, as a nonprofit ourselves, over 100 different demographic surveys, which can sound like a small or a big number to you depending on your perspective. But when you consider that each individual survey with any tweak of a question or tweak of an answer field means we need to go back and resurvey our entire staff. So it's a very ineffective, very inefficient process. So we thought that there is definitely a role for us to play as pertains to standardization. Compounding that, some of the surveys that we were receiving from funders that we very much respect and admire were asking us questions such as tallying our entire staff to a male-female 100% binary, in essence, making any non-binary colleagues obsolete. So we also thought that there was a role that we could potentially play as it pertains to the standards that we are supporting with the field. And so that was really the impetus. How can we reduce the reporting burden on organizations, support the field with standards that can be applied in a plug and play model rather than having to be redone by each individual funder that's curious about this data? And then we see the collection of this information as a public good. So always ensuring that this is easily accessible, which I'll touch on in a second. If you can go to the next slide, please, Sarah. So in essence, we really wanted to build this initiative. We like to say, kind of as the data geeks that we are at times, that we have so much love for demographic data. We officially launched the initiative last year on February 14th. What our intentions and objectives were is to really build on what already exists, which is the Candid nonprofit profile, which is the GuideStar profile, if you're more familiar with that. So the infrastructure was already built. Again, our goal here is for organizations to go to their profile, share their demographic data one time in a standardized format, and have that be reused by the entire sector at large. As we invested into those collection field building efforts and awareness building efforts, as we increased the amount of contributed data, we wanted to ensure that all of this data was made freely available. So I'll share a little bit more as to the many ways in which we have done so. And of course, we recognize that it's not simply an awareness building initiative or campaign. Supporting organizations in their collection, supporting them with best practices has been core to the manner in which the initiative has evolved, particularly taking a nonprofit-centric approach. You can go to the next slide, please. As we kind of evolved the initiative, really our intentions and our objectives were to better support the field in having aggregated data to ensure that any social sector actor had the tools and the resources to be able to benchmark their portfolio or their organizations, again, with the hope of starting to see some gaps that may exist, particularly as pertains to representation. And as I said originally, and as that the quote was quite on point, to ensure that we're tracking progress to that as well. As we evolve the initiative, again, this is a manner for organizations to actually share their own story and ensure that they are communicating to their constituents and prospective and current funders, the communities that they actually serve and represent. And again, all of this with the intention of having organizations fill out their data one time rather than having to go through these dozens or perhaps even more surveys individually. You can go to the next slide, please, Sarah.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. I'm trying to remember which one the next slide is.
Get out. Okay.
Thank you. So this is just an example here as to what these survey questions really entail. This is specifically asking the race and ethnicity of the leader on the left, and then also of how their board members are self-identifying as pertains to gender identity. Before launching the initiative, we took a fairly in-depth analysis as to all of the, we went through dozens and dozens of different demographic surveys, compared it to census data, did a deep literature review, hired external consultants in order to land on these preset questions with a preset taxonomy to ensure that it was adequately identifying or adequately capturing the multitude of identities that we all possess. This is meant to be a standard that we're hoping the field adopts, and at the same time, it's meant to be quite dynamic. It's meant to be evolving, especially as we know that language, as pertains to identity, is quite fluid in nature. At the same time, we have to kind of couple that with not making major changes radically, because that makes the data very difficult to actually understand. But to ensure that our identities are captured here, while also still being open and free to changes that are particularly informed by our partners. If you can go to the next slide, please. So that's just, as I said, a couple of the questions that we were collecting. This is the way that it actually shows up in the GuideStar profile. So this is Candid's data as an organization. You see the fields that we are collecting are race and ethnicity, gender identity, transgender identity, sexual orientation, disability status. We collect that for the leader, co-leader should it exist, the board, the senior staff, and the entire staff. I'm highlighting the top part because that is the demographic information of our leader. And it's important because since it's for a single individual, that opens itself up for intersectional analysis, which is really instrumental to this conversation. And a big hat tip to kind of the WFN team is that as a data quality partner of ours, as we were seeking inputs as to how we could improve the initiative, you all really pushed us hard to think about, well, as we're building out more freely available tools, can we co-create something that allows us to actually spotlight the intersectionality and the data that we're collecting there? So I think it seems like we can turn it over into what does this mean as far as insights and research?
Yes. So I'm going to turn it over to Kat. Kat, are you able to share?
I think so. Let's find out. Think that worked. Well, yeah, so like I said, my team has the fun of getting to look at the data and try to figure out what we can learn about the sector from the data we've been collecting. We've been really focused on looking at the demographic data over the last year or two. So lots and lots of things to share, but just a few kind of top line insights that hopefully get you excited about learning more about the data. So one of the things we've learned is that there is still a racial leadership gap in the sector. Overall, in the data set, about 47% of the nonprofit staff sharing information with us are white, but about 70% of nonprofit CEOs are white. So there is definitely a gap in racial representation within our data set, within the sector. Another thing that we've been looking at is how this kind of aligns with where the nonprofits work and what the underlying population looks like. And so this is a map of the percentage of white adults by state according to census data, and you can kind of see what this looks like. And then we compared that to CEO representation in our data set, and you can see that white CEOs are overrepresented compared to the underlying population across the board. We've also found evidence that the nonprofit sector has a glass escalator. So some of you might be familiar with the idea of a glass ceiling, which is that, right, when you get to the top of organizations, especially if they're male dominated, it really becomes hard for women to break through. But less popular, but just as important, is there's research on the glass escalator, which is basically the phenomenon that men in female dominated occupations often experience a smoother and faster rise to the top. And so we're finding evidence of that in the data as well. So we do find, as most of the research shows, that the nonprofit sector is female dominated. There are more women working in the sector than men, but as you move up the leadership ranks, women's representation starts to diminish. And it also starts to diminish if we start looking at larger organizations. So here's a representation on boards, and as organizations get larger, women's representation gets less strong. And as Sarah promised, we also looked at the intersection of race and gender with a lot of these findings. And, probably not a surprise to folks on this call, but we found that looking at the intersection of race and gender really mattered. So for instance, when it comes to the glass escalator, it's really mostly white men that are benefiting from this easier and smoother rise to the top of organizations and to the top of larger organizations specifically. To unpack a little bit more of what that looks like, here's a breakdown of CEO race and gender. We kind of lumped them for the sake of simplicity and the amount of data that we have to white or BIPOC and male and female. And basically what you can see is for white male CEOs, they run 22% of the smallest organizations, but 41% of the largest organizations in the data set. And conversely, BIPOC women CEOs run 28% of the smallest organizations and only 14% of the largest organizations. We've also started looking at the intersection of race and gender CEO representation across different subsectors, and we're seeing really wide variation there. So for example, in places like education, we're seeing more BIPOC representation and more BIPOC women in particular. And then you get to subsectors like the environment and religious organizations, and the representation at the CEO level is just not the same. Again, only had a few minutes to kind of tease you with some of the things that we're finding today, but my team's also put together a lot of resources for folks who want to dig in and learn more. We've recently put out a research report on the state of diversity in the nonprofit sector I think it's about 73 pages, has lots of charts, lots of tables with more data. It has 4 different sections. And I want to highlight that the second section, which is by far the largest section, is about who leads nonprofit organizations. And we have intersectional analyses for all of the information in that section, because that is the level of information of data for which we have intersectional data. We also put out a Harvard Business Review article to talk more about the glass escalator in the nonprofit sector and what we're finding with that data. That does leverage the same demographic data that we were talking about today. And we have a number of resources for researchers, analysts, and evaluators who want to not just look at the data, but use it. We have some best practices and some tips and advice for those of you who want to dig into the data yourselves. And I think it's back to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that analysis and also for doing this work. So I want to talk about the origins of the WFM partnership, because last year on February 14th, I attended the rollout of the demographics campaign, and they shared some of these, I think it was Anna Koons from your team shared some of this, the research that you had been doing to date. And I was so excited because finally there was a data provider that was doing this intersectional research and was presenting it. And I knew from all of the conversations with our members and all the work that you're doing that it was so important and needed. And so I started to look at it, and I tested the prototype, the tools, and started to look at everything. And I was like, wait, where is it? Because I think our members are going to want to know, okay, we have this broad overview. How does our local community compare? Or we have this broad overview. How does organizations that are specifically working in the gender space compare? And how does our network compare? And there are also other questions that you all might have, that I might have from the data. So I was like, how can we do it? And so that's what launched the series of discussions. It was over a year ago that Cesar reached out to us about partnering, and we were hesitant at first because we're like, we really want to see intersectional analysis in your tools. So why don't you redesign them? And they're like, we already spent the grant money. It's already been done. So then we said, well, we'll do it. And that's basically the conversation, how the conversation started. And at first we were thinking that WFN would create a tool at the with the intersectional data on leadership ourselves, and that we would create it, we would put it out there. But that's only going to get us so far, and that's only going to be our questions that we have that can be answered. It's not going to be representative of the questions of the rest of our membership, who bring so much lived experience and so many angles to the conversation. And so we started talking about, okay, what can we do? How can we bring folks together? We also knew that we've heard requests for more kind of advanced Tableau training. A lot of us were very inspired by the, I think it was Women's Foundation for the State of Arizona's living wage dashboard that they put out, and the dynamic interactive nature of that tool. And so we wanted to provide a way to provide that training, the kind of deeper level dynamic training, but with something of value at the end of it. So we bring together WFN's knowledge, we bring together a comprehensive advanced training in Tableau, and we have a public tool that benefits all as the result. So it's not just training for the sake of training, but it's training for a purpose, and it's bringing us all together. So that is how this project came to be. And so now there are a couple elements to it, and I'm going to turn it over to Kukwa to get more specific.
Thank you. So as Sarah eloquently put it, we all know that you guys are doing this great, amazing work. So we want to just put it all in one place. So we would love to have you all participate in this initiative, because it benefits all of us, our work, and our motivation to make change. So being able to create an intersectional data tool will help us increase visibility past a binary vision. This would also help us pinpoint and drill down our data, which will in turn help us hold funders accountable for their commitments to various causes. So ideally, we would love your full engagement. So what does that look like? Oh, thank you, Sarah. We have a pretty graphic. Like I was saying previously, we would love for your organization to join WFN's design cohort to build a public tool sourced by Candid's DVC data. This design cohort would be responsible for co-creating an intersectional data tool that will serve as the basis for collecting demographic data. So the goal for this project is for us collectively to create a public access tool that benefits all, for us to facilitate, or for there to be a facilitation of a positive feedback loop between data providers and data users, with the emphasis on intersectionality and folks with lived experiences of not seeing themselves fully represented in the data. Another goal of this project is to mainstream capacity for intersectional analysis in database design and reporting. We would like to increase demographic data sharing as standard practice in a way that is not burdensome to nonprofits. We would like to amplify deep knowledge and expertise of our network in data and research. We would love to boost data visualization expertise within the network as well. You will participate in a series of data visualization trainings using the demographics via Candid dataset and your questions you'd like to answer with the data. You'll be able to design, build, and workshop a prototype of this tool. And lastly, you'll be able to have training that is equivalent to what you would get at a Tableau boot camp, but with a real outcome at the end. Right now, we don't have time to fully go into like the full overview of this project itself. Our aim is for this cohort to co-create. So we will have a meeting that'll be on June 26th. And at that meeting, we will discuss project structure as currently imagined, project expectations. How much time should you expect to spend if you participate? Other possible roles, like a cohort advisor or a product tester, for example. Expertise requirement. So there's some expertise using data to advocate for change, experience requirements, sorry. There's going to be experience using data to advocate for change, experience collecting or reporting on demographic data. You do not need to have Tableau experience. The benefits for you and the organization, possible limitations and considerations, and as we keep reiterating, Tableau training. So you'll get more information on this meeting in your inboxes. And so if you all heard all of this and you want to be involved, but you know at the time you might not have the organizational capacity, we have other levels of engagement so that you can still be a part of this work. You have the opportunity to partner with Candid to encourage your local community networks and grantees to share data by partnering with Candid. You have the opportunity to access, by partnering with Candid, you have the opportunity to access public demographic data sets and other resources, baseline reports or demographics of your grantees. It helped standardize demographic data sharing in a way that's not burdensome to grantees and facilitate a racial justice and gender equity lens on grant making. And I will pass things off to Cesar so that he can demo what that would look like for you all.
Thanks, Kua. I would hope that folks are pretty excited by the design cohort. It's quite a pitch that you have there, Kua, and I definitely wanted to do just a tremendous amount of gratitude for the WFN team, because I think that there's a lot of discussions oftentimes in the sector on just more of a participatory nature. But really, this is the essence of participatory design to ensure that tools are being built with and for the community and not something that's just being kind of created in a silo somewhere. So hopefully everyone here and anyone watching the recording in the WFN community is excited to take part in the design. But as you mentioned, Kukua, we've recognized that there's some bandwidth constraints and bandwidth issues that may be affecting the opportunity or the ability to be able to take part in the cohort, because it is going to be quite rewarding, but it's not going to come without its investments of time and resources as well. I don't know, Sarah, sorry, were you sharing screen? Did you want to share those slides? Would you want me to share baselines or anything of the sort?
Oh,
what would you prefer?
I realized that I didn't incorporate all of your slides into ours. So if you have slides that you'd like to accompany the part about partnership benefits, or if you'd like me to share.
Sure, you can share it. I can talk through them.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay.
And so, as Kuna mentioned, we'll be sending out, the WFN team will be sending out more as it pertains to the design cohort. As far as just generally partnering with Candid, it's an open invitation and a warm-hearted one to be able to join the Demographics Speak Candid initiative. Please feel free to just go to candid.org/DVC, and you can learn more about it there. I think this is definitely a slide that I wanted to touch on at the outset. And you can just click on it one more time, because I do think it's important. For instance, some of the research that Kat was speaking about previously. This is research that may have not even been feasible just a couple of years ago. So, the fact that we've been able to bring on over 150 formal partners, a large swath of them being grant-making institutions like yourselves, we've seen an incredible amount of increase as pertains to contributed data. Now, with nearly 70,000 individual nonprofits have shared demographic data on the makeup of their organization, with 40,000 of those having done so just in the last year alone. So we're looking forward to not only being able to leverage this for increased reports, increased analysis, and increased resources, but also to ensure that we aren't making extrapolations and we can increase the amount of data that we're actually seeing to have the most coherent and comprehensive data the sector's seen as pertains to diversity and demographic information. Let's see what the next slide brings us. I can't 100% recall, but I'm sure it'll be helpful. So I spoke about this a little bit. Maybe you can go on straight to, if you can go to slide 10 really quickly, please. I wanted to mention that. Sorry to make you go backwards a tiny bit.
No, all good.
So we have spoken about accessing the data. So again, as far as becoming a partner, we try to make it as simple as possible. There's no contracts, there's no fees for anything that we're speaking about. You simply let us know and we begin to work with you. We have a standardized approach in which we've been working with a number of different grant makers, but frankly, at the end of the day, depending upon where you are in your own demographic data collection journey, it tends to be quite a bespoke and personalized relationship that we're kind of exploring. Access to the information, though, I think is quite critical. And I think that some of the first questions that we got, and if you happen to be able to read Elizabeth's blog on kind of the WFN partnership with Candid, there was some initial hesitance, even as Sarah mentioned, because of the way that we're collecting this information and wanting to ensure that it's not going to be a single source just holding on to it. So for us, it's been really important to ensure that this data is seen as a public good and to increase the amount of access points that individuals like yourselves, or frankly anyone in the social sector, can actually be able to glean this information. So the first, as I mentioned beforehand, is just the GuideStar profile. If you go to any GuideStar profile, you can sign up for a free account. You can begin to see the demographic makeup on an individual organization by organizational level. We'll be sharing these slides afterwards, and everything you see highlighted are linked. The second, which is the demographics API. So the values of the evolution of the initiative have always meant to be both user-centric and user-informed. The fact that we're speaking here today is because it came from Sarah, from the WFN team, as to how we can evolve and bring more value to your community in particular. Another piece that we heard was that it's great you're making this data freely accessible. As a program officer or as a funder, it would be much better if it was integrated into my grants management system where I'm already doing my due diligence. Having heard that last year, our team got to work, and last summer we released a free demographics API, which again, if you click on that link, you can go to the developer portal. We made all the code and freely available as well. But that was really an intermediary, and we began to partner with grants management system vendors and providers. And all of this has been integrated by all of the major grants management system providers, except for Salesforce at this moment. But we're optimistic they'll come around sooner than later. Still yet, we also worked really closely with the Tableau Foundation. And so that fourth box that you'll see there is the Tableau dashboard. This is a publicly accessible dashboard where you can start to filter through some of this data, whether it be through subject area, region, budgetary constraints, et cetera. Drop in a list of EINs if you have a specific portfolio and you want to start to get a snapshot of the type of demographic data that's been contributed by that specific grantee portfolio. And then lastly, I did mention that we have close to 70,000 organizations that have contributed their demographic data to us already. We make all of that data freely accessible. So this last box there in the last link, you can actually request access to our entire data set, and we would be happy to provide that to you all. We want to ensure that we are serving still as a bit of gatekeepers because there's a lot of sensitivity with information. So we do ask a few questions around the utility of how that information would be used. If you go to the next slide, please, Sarah. Again, we're hoping that you all begin to see some of the value for your work, predominantly as a grant maker, to have visibility into the makeup of your grantee community. But the support and the importance of taking a nonprofit-centric approach throughout this process has been instrumental to how we've evolved. So as I mentioned from the outset, as far as the objectives, principally, we want to ensure that nonprofits are spending less time on burdensome paperwork, on additional reporting, particularly for information that's already been shared publicly. It's an opportunity also for them to bring additional visibility to organizations and funders in particular that may not have been aware of their work. It's a manner for organizations to demonstrate a commitment to diversity and inclusion. And we've also been thinking a lot about incentives to support organizations. So one of our initiatives, for instance, is the Go for the Gold initiative, which if you just share demographic information on your leader and you are an organization with under $1 million budget, you get free access to Foundation Directory, which is about a $700 or $750 a year subscription to support organizations with their fundraising strategies and goals as well. So hopefully this gives you a broader sense of how we're thinking about supporting the nonprofit, listening to them. We actually just had a webinar last week as well as we shared out more information around a 6-month research project that was done to better understand the nonprofit experience, how we can ensure that we're building solutions as it pertains to privacy and increasing the agency of each individual nonprofit so they get to choose who sees their demographic data, and so on and so forth. And we're optimistic that with the design cohort, we too will be learning from this community in particular on how we can continue to evolve the initiative and make it as valuable and worthwhile for the sector at large. I think there might be a last slide, but that's fine. I think we've covered the majority of it. I guess here again, you can see a full list of our partners if you go to Candid /DVC. And as I said, it's the makeup is predominantly grant makers, but we have many nonprofit associations, PSOs, and GMS providers as well. And again, for us, you can easily sign up to be a partner. You can let WFN know. You can reach out to us directly. You can reach us at partnerships@candid.org. Please feel free to connect with me directly. I would always be happy to have a conversation. You can reach out to me at just caesar.delvalle@candid.org. And ultimately, what we're hoping from our partners in this, again, journey is to ask your grantees to share their data via their Candid GuideStar profile, to leverage and to retrieve the information that we have collected through that infrastructure, and to attempt to the best of our all abilities to limit the use of custom formats, because we see that is just creating a burden, and it solely provides a value to an individual entity rather than to the sector at large. The last few slides are just a few additional resources. So again, as these slides are shared out, hopefully it's a little bit more fun reading for anyone that wants to kind of double click on some of the pieces that have been shared. I'll turn it back to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive view. So again, just to reiterate, the three ways to participate in this initiative are, first of all, to join our design cohort and engage in our, come to our meeting, our data and research peer community meeting on June 26th to talk about all of the elements of that. That's the biggest lift for you and your organization. But you could also participate in a more peripheral way as an advisor to that project or to a product user. The second way to participate is to partner with this initiative and encourage your grantees and your community, because I know that our members are very connected with within their communities. So it's not just their grantees, but it's also networks that you belong to, and encourage folks to share their demographic data within their Candid profiles. And then lastly, make sure that your data is up to date. So when we get started on this project, we'll have a full view of our network and we'll be able to hit the ground running. And a reminder, if you aren't able to participate in our design cohort, but you would like to do your own research with the data, that the public data set is available to you. And so just remember that you don't have to participate in order to do research with this data set. And Kat's tools that she put together, her research guide, are very helpful in kind of figuring out what you might do or how you might go about it. I wanted to share one more piece before we get to, I want to make sure that we save enough time for questions. These webinars always go so fast. But I wanted to share one more thing. So Kat and Caesar mentioned the Tableau tool, and so one of the benefits that you get is a baseline of your grantees. So they'll put together a report or a spreadsheet with all of your grantees and anyone who has shared data to date. And so I just wanted to show you what that looks like. And I will share my screen again.
Yeah, as you do so, Sarah, I mean, you mentioned that anyone can have access to the entire data set, which is helpful for pretty thorough analysis. But these reports are meant to be fairly bespoke. So again, if you would like to just share a list of your grantees, whether that be active grantees, whether that be grantees over the last 5 years, whether that be current and prospective grantees, we can run reports, again, freely and happily on any sort of makeup for you to get a better sense of the demographic data that's been contributed. This will be done in an aggregate format where you have a summary page, which I believe we may be seeing here in a second, and also in an individual format, so you get to see the data on an org by org basis.
Yeah, so it's quite a comprehensive look. So this is actually a look here, which of our entire networks that have shared, of grantees of our entire network that have shared data to date. And I want to give a lot of credit to Candid because they put all this data together and then I keep asking for questions. And so I'd like to be able to segment this data more. They're going to bring in the ability to do that. But I also wanted to share our what it looks like in the Tableau tool. So I pulled together the EINs of public women's funds in the United States. And see if I can get there quickly. Oh, I have a lot of tabs. Okay. Okay. Apologies. Okay. So I'm going to go to the Tableau tool and capture this list of EINs. So if you were to do this yourself for your own grantees, this is basically all the data. It's updated monthly, and this is all the organizations that have shared to date. And you can search by state, by region. The searching by subjects and populations has been kind of locked down at a pretty high level. So this would be, if you're interested in exploring within our tool, this is something that we might look at. But if you create your cohort, a number of them weren't found, so we want to go back and look at why. But we can look at, so this is of our public women's funds in the US, demographics of leadership, board members, senior staff, number of staff. So that's when we're looking at race and ethnicity. We can look at gender. Not a surprise that here, transgender status, which I really appreciate about this tool, or about Candid's data collection, sexual orientation, disability status, and seals of transparency. So basically how engaged folks are in sharing about their organizations. So that is something that you can do now, but we hope that you will continue to join us in this work. And now I would like to open it up for questions. I actually have a question. So you mentioned that you're continuing to evolve the tool. I know that a lot of our members have very comprehensive surveys, and so do we, of in terms of representing identity within their surveys, and capturing kind of the full understanding of how people within their networks or their grantees identify. What is your kind of vision for, or can you share about some organizations that maybe have had this conversation with you, or what you and your process for community engagement?
So could you elaborate a tiny bit just on the process for community engagement? What you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we're excited about with this project is that we're bringing together users of the data, which is our network, providers of the data, which is you, and kind of that push-pull of what's needed and what's possible. And so just wondering how, I know that you went through a very comprehensive user engagement or community engagement when you did the taxonomy updates, or you sought feedback. Wondering how you came to these categories, or how you came to the demographic categories that you have, and kind of how you might evolve beyond that.
You want to speak about how we got to the categories, Kat?
Sure. Yeah. So just at a high level, identities evolve. This is, I think, actually maybe our third version of the demographics since we've started this work. And so we have changed them a bit over time. Every time we've changed them, those changes have been in partnership with, leaders in the field. We have done interviews and focus groups. Our goal is to align with current language and current best practices, while not making there be so many options that it becomes a burden. So we've been trying to really limit on what are the ones that seem most requested right now so that we can help alleviate that burden. Feedback is always welcome. We do have ongoing, you don't have to wait for the next time we're ready to update. We do track every piece of feedback we have. We also try not to change the categories and options too constantly, because again, then that's a burden if everybody has to recollect the data because we've changed things. So we try to be prudent about that. But feedback, you don't have to wait for it. You can give it to us anytime you want.
Thank you. We have a question from Solas. Solas, am I pronouncing your name right?
Hi, it's Solace.
Oh.
I'm also babysitting a 3-year-old right now. So if you hear, maybe, yeah, exactly. So if I have to type in the chat, please let me know. So I have two particular questions. The first is around that data set that you showed for like the CEOs. I was wondering what the graphics and analysis would look like if that page expanded beyond the binary. So you collected data that included non-binary and trans identities, but the analysis that we saw was just binaried. And I also just want to generally encourage data sets that are reflective of the expansive questions that you're asking. So that's my first question, like what does that graphic look like? And then the second question is about the engagement with grantee partners around their data. Have you all thought about how to engage with grantee partners in which research and data has just been extractive and hasn't been knowledge-based or power-driven? Also, I'm from Grantmakers for Girls of Color as well. My name is Solace, and I literally am a data analyst, so I think about this all the time.
I can jump in on the first part. Thanks so much for asking that. Yes, we did look at the transgender and non-binary data and the analysis, and those charts and tables are available in the full report. The graphics I was showing today about the glass escalator piece in particular, that was taken from an article where we were very kind of specifically talking about women's experience. And we actually initially put the non-binary data in the chart and you couldn't see it. It was less than 1%. So like you couldn't see the line, it looked like a mistake. So we added it into the footnote. And then the transgender data, just to be clear, is a separate data question that we're asking. And so all of those, the tables and charts are available in the report, but they're as a separate question.
I would love to add on to that a little bit, that one of the things that's exciting about this project is that you are bringing your expertise to this project. And so the dashboard that we're going to design together would be a reflection of that question, for example, and the work that you're doing. So we're going to bring all of us together, those who would like to participate, and bring all of that expertise and decide how it will be visualized. And this will be a public tool that will live on WFN site, and I believe may live on Candid site. So we're going to be promoting the folks who participate as well. So I'm very excited by that question because it's very aligned with the project. And I forgot the second question.
As far as the second question, I'm happy to jump in. And I did see, Kelly, that you had a question beforehand. So for anyone that has questions that we may not get to since we're just a few minutes from ending, please feel free to just reach out to us directly or to WFN. As far as the second question, I think recognizing first and foremost that all demographic data needs to be shared willingly and with consent. So it's not meant to be extractive as other data has been in the past. As I really briefly shared, one of the incentives that we also provide is the Go for the Gold, which is a manner for us to think, well, how can we provide some level of, let's say, remuneration, but frankly, just value, recognizing that it takes time to collect this information, that it takes time to share it back. But where we've really been taking a nonprofit-centric approach is we've been creating a host of different learning experiences, trying to just build more visibility as to why is this even important to collect to begin with? How are funders using this? And frankly, putting a lot of the onus on the grant makers themselves, on the funders themselves, to speak more about how are they collecting it, how will they be using it, to demystify, for instance, if your organization is under the belief that you're not diverse enough and you may be actually cannibalizing a prospective a grant, then you may not want to share. It's really the funder that needs to be quite explicit about how this information is going to be used, perhaps even for just internal tracking processes, et cetera. And we started to see more and more examples of funders putting and creating publicly facing pages to share more about why they're asking for this, the resources that exist, et cetera. But to Sarah's point, we do want to ensure a nonprofit-centric approach. And so, Solace, if you're able to take part in the design cohort, we look forward to having you bring that perspective and that wisdom as well.
We're just about at time. Let's see, Kelly, if your question was quick. Okay, Kelly. And then Travis is asking about timeline. Yes, please come to our discussion. We're going to be co-creating based on the needs of the cohort. So please come to our session on June 26th. It's at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. It's our standard research and data peer community meeting where we will be discussing the nuances of a lot of elements of both the project and the cohort itself. Without further ado, I would love to say goodbye. I'd love to stay and continue to talk, but I appreciate all of your time for coming today. A big thank you to our friends from Candid. A big thank you to all of you for coming, and we hope to continue this work together. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Lika.
Sorry. Hey, Sarah, what can we do now? Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for reminding me about it. And sorry for the mix up. I thought it was, oh, are we recording?
Oh, let me stop recording.